the Grey Hat Beard podcast.
Hello and welcome to show 15 of the Grey Hat Beard podcast. We're the modern workplace podcast that talks about Microsoft 365 and all the things around the modern workplace. I'm Kevin McDonnell. I'm the Grey of Grey Hat Beard. I'm a solutions architect at CPS.
I'm Al Eardley, also a solution architect at CPS and a Office Apps and Services MVP. Always have to remember that.
And just above me, this is Gary. He's the beard of Grey Hat Beard. Unfortunately, he's been the dutiful father of a child who's decided doesn't want to sleep anymore, and he's letting his wife go off for a massage, so which I think is very sensible, but unfortunately means he can't join us. Now, we were going to have a stand-in beard in Chris Huntingford, otherwise known as Tattooed CRM Guy. Unfortunately, he hasn't appeared yet. So what we're going to do is record the news. He may suddenly pop up halfway through the news and we can all have a good chuckle live on the podcast, and we'll see what we edit down. But don't worry, we are still going to do the Power Platform questions at some point. We'll try and rearrange, but we thought we'd crack on with the news and record that and then come back to Chris later. So I think I will start off with some news. Now, it's been a busy week and we're going to go on to some of the Inspire stuff later because I think there's so much to talk about there, but we're going to talk about some of the other news first, and something that I think came out before Inspire or slightly outside of it is the new employee onboarding hub. And this is something that will sit within SharePoint. I did see that they've also included it in the SharePoint Lookbook, which I know we've mentioned many times before. And really it's a place to go for new employees to go and find out resources, get information, share data, share things about the organization. Also, I believe, and I have to admit I haven't installed it yet, that's something that's been on my list to try and get on there. It's got a checklist on there as well, so when someone joins, generally you're going to have a checklist. I know many organizations have this. There's probably quite a few where it's just a Excel sheet somewhere, but this is a really nice way of getting people going. It's mobile ready, so it'll work in a responsive way. I think a really great way to show what you can do with SharePoint and give you a basis, even if really nice way to get people onboarded in a good way. And I know a few of our clients have been looking at similar things and replacing their old ones, but I think it's could be an interesting thing to look at.
I think this has always been a process that, when you look at automation, the joiners, movers, leavers, onboarding, it's always been high up on the agenda in terms of processes that take time, that need the management. So being able to have as you say, until we actually understand it, can't really say exactly what it's doing until we've installed it, but to have a good starting point where we can just go, actually, click, deploy, configure, that's a great starting point.
Yeah,
I think that it plays into a couple of the news articles that are next as well, because one of the things that, certainly we do when people start is to go through some of the best practices, what they should and shouldn't be doing, certainly around security as well. And I think part of the onboarding process is around how you educate your users as to what they should and shouldn't be doing when it comes to security, opening those spear phishing emails, those emails that just have malicious content. And I think that kind of plays into certainly a couple of stories that I've seen this week, both the FA and so it wasn't actually the FA, was it? It was a Premier League club that almost gave away £1 million in a transfer, and the Blackboard hack. So universities all using Blackboard to actually manage content.
Those that don't know, what is Blackboard? I think it's kind of as it says there, an education administration system. I've spoken to some universities before that have been using it.
It provides services, so it's a service provider to universities, very focused university services. But obviously, with all of these things, all organisations use lots of different systems, and as well as onboarding your new users, you need to make sure that your partners are adhering to those same processes, really, because this is exposed data that is essentially owned by the universities. It's exposed it to ransomware, and it's probably going to damage Blackboard quite a lot. And the Premier League one, I think this is a great example of spear phishing. They've tried to get in to get some specific information around specific users in order to then, basically approve a transfer deal going to an account that is illegitimate.
Absolutely.
And I think these are all scenarios where, when we're looking at how we work with clients, how clients work, the security is absolutely essential. It's essential in everything that we're doing, and how we as users consider incoming emails and documents.
And I think it really exposes that we spend a lot of time making sure all the code we write, by we I mean I write there, Al.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't, me, I'm not allowed to write code.
But and also things we do, we look at security, we make sure that the technology itself is secure. But I think in all these cases, and certainly the Twitter hack recently, it was actually the people. It's making sure that people understand that you don't click on those links. I think the one with Twitter is they got to know people there, and that's how they got in. It's not via all these clever films where they talk about hacking and breaking through firewalls and stuff like that. It's social engineering. That is the biggest thing. And you can't put so much technology around that. Things like the new onboarding, getting that information, getting people understanding these problems and thinking about it with what they do, that is absolutely critical, actually.
Absolutely. And I think, when we onboard people, there's a whole raft of training they go through around security. As consultants, when we go and work with clients, there's often a whole set of training that we need to do to make sure that we've essentially passed a test that says that we understand what the risks are. And I think a lot of clients will do that, a lot of organizations will do that, but not enough. And I think that's the thing. It's not that nobody's doing it, it's that not enough people are doing it, and they're not reinforcing it and doing it on a regular enough basis.
And I think on security, a couple of things. One, I've mentioned to you, Al, we're hoping to get someone who's going to come on the show and talk about the security exams. And I think we're seeing more and more people get involved in security, especially with this remote working. People have moved to remote working and they're suddenly going, hang on, what are all the things we need to consider? We've had to jump here. What are the things that if we were doing this in a managed way, if we missed out? We've talked Teams governance recently. I think there's security around that as well. So we do have someone we'll announce shortly who's going to come and talk about some of the security exams. Yep. The other one that I haven't mentioned to you yet, so apologies for dropping this on in the recording, but someone we have both met before who does quite a lot working with small businesses in a voluntary role, talking about cybersecurity and things, and really so going from the kind of big enterprise, looking at all the things that Microsoft 365 can do, to just going out and talking to people, getting that awareness going on. I thought it'd be very interesting to have them on the show and talk Absolutely. About that it doesn't have to be rolling out your E5 with your data loss prevention, your massive things there. There's a whole lot you can do as small businesses to make sure you're secure on there. So I thought that'd be quite interesting as well.
And I think it doesn't have to be, technology is only one element, isn't it? You can't rely on the technology, because the social engineering is so much more powerful as a way in. If you can pick a lock, that's great, but if you can get somebody to open the door for you, that's much easier. That sounds like it would be great.
Yeah, nothing like planning during the show.
Absolutely.
So that was the other news, but I think really this week has been inspired by Inspire and Microsoft Ready, which are now I always get this wrong way around. One's the partner conference, and Ready is the slightly related one that's not quite partner, and you might know better than I do on this one.
So Inspire is the partner conference. So this is where, for example, in the UK, there's 22,000 consulting organizations and ISVs who are partners with Microsoft, and so this is really where they get an insight into what the business plan is for Microsoft over the coming year. Microsoft are great at reinventing what they're doing, reprioritizing what they're doing, and they do that every year. Renaming things, we'll come on to that, won't we? But Inspire is really, where it's customer focused. What are we going to be doing over the next year? How are they reorganizing internally, which they always do. Their end of FY is June, so every July everything gets thrown up in the air, and then we wait and see at Inspire how it all lands again. So lots of information coming out of Inspire, and Ready is the Microsoft version of the conference, so that they're kind of sharing some internal information, so that
because they
everybody
used to be separate, but they've over the last few years have brought those to happen at the same time.
Yeah,
isn't it?
Yeah, and that's really because they do, they're adapting to the strategies that they need to do, and responding to the marketplace. So as you say, there's a lot coming out, and it's where partners will sit down and go, right, what's our strategy for the next year? Where do we need to focus on?
And I think it's interesting because you think that the partner conference, a lot of it would be partners releasing news, a lot of it would be things from Microsoft that are interesting to partners. But a lot of the news that we're just about to talk about, I think, is far broader than that. This isn't just opportunities for partners. This is some very interesting stuff that's come out. So
it does feel like we've been talking about big conferences with releases, big Microsoft conferences with releases of information for the last sort of 2 or 3 months. Seems to be a steady flow of, and they're all announcing slightly different things or building on previous announcements, which I think is a very interesting story that we're starting to see. And it's started in the technical spaces, and it's culminated in the business space, the partner space, where it's, well, this is how it's going to impact your customers.
Absolutely. So if you're interested in this, in the show notes, there's a link to the Inspire 2020 book of news, and they've got all the different elements. You can watch the video with a kind of introduction to those, broken down by Azure apps, infrastructure. There's some very interesting news like Microsoft Lists is going GA for Office 365 in July and for Teams in August. There's Universal Print, which is, I think, was talked about back in Ignite, the ability to have your print servers. So all this move to the cloud, print servers being one of the kind of slower things to move on there. Now Microsoft's got an offering around that. Some interesting news on the business apps about return to the workplace. So those of you looking to return to the workplace, there's now some Power Platform goodness coming with that. And now my OneNote's hanging to remind myself of one other thing. Yeah, the Cloud Practice Playbook, which I think was another smaller, interesting thing that came from that really is a load of patterns and things from how to use things in Azure and best practice in there, which is great.
Yeah.
But there were some really big announcements. Al, do you want to kick off with our favourite?
So I think over the previous conferences, MBAS and BILS, there have been announcements coming around how the Power Platform is essentially marrying up with Teams to allow us to build apps in Power Platform that are contextually sat within Teams. And the biggest announcement that we've had this week from Inspire is the announcement that Common Data Service is having a rebrand. It's been renamed to Dataflex Pro, and we're not quite sure about this quite yet because there do seem to be some organisations out there that have not patents, trademarks on Dataflex. So hold fire on updating all of your content with Dataflex. It may yet change. It may be another SkyDrive.
And I know we'll put a few of these links in the show note because Al, you found a good one of someone, I think, threatening to sue as they had the trademarks. I was just looking for the announcement, and if I look at Dataflex, there's some ergonomic products. There was the high-level programming language. A company. I think the
programming language.
We'll finally get to the right one there.
So I think it's so the name change is quite an interesting one. I think Common Data Service, it was a name, it described what it does, but what they're trying to do with Dataflex now is to say Dataflex Pro is Common Data Service, it stays the same, and Dataflex is a smaller brother, and it is designed or sister. It is a smaller sibling. Thank you very much, and it is designed to be used with Power Platform solutions that are built within Teams. So, and that means that you can build a solution, deploy it into Teams. Every time it's instantiated, it will have a new Dataflex repository of data, which basically is like having a database that you can build your applications on, which I think with the combination of, SharePoint for documents, lists for lists, I'm not quite sure how that's going to play.
To get rid of access, let's say.
Yeah. It's going to give us a whole new way to envisage how we work and how we design solutions that sit within the context of teams. So, where we're talking about processes, we're talking about interaction. Contextually, if it's related to that team, it'll be a very, very powerful tool. It's going to be interesting.
I think we'll talk about more of this in the second part, because I think licensing to me plays into this a big part. For a long time, loads of people said CDS is great, but I'm not paying for that. That's too expensive. And I think reason and rationally, once you start using it, it is a good price. I think the licensing for CDS is great if you can embrace it. To get people to want to embrace it, it's quite a big step up. And I've always had a bit of a concern that it's that step up to doing it in a full way. This to me finally is that step up. It gives you access to all those benefits of being able to have related data entities. You never want to do that in SharePoint. That's such a bad idea to have related ones in there. You're always going to get in trouble. This allows you to do that. Benefits of having effectively triggers with flows, all the good things you've got with the CDS. The security, I think security is a massive thing. You can do security at that data layer and have it appear into different things. So many good things with the CDS.
But there's still lots and lots of questions about how this contextually works within teams. It's things like the security. How does that map to the team security? What is if it's instantiated around each team, then what is the interaction between CDS repositories to say, is there a reporting way to aggregate it up, or is it a security model?
Yeah, from what I understand, for those who know a bit about Power Platform, you have different environments. There will be a separate environment for each team. So really, it will be in isolation. Now, we haven't got Chris to kind of shout back at us here, but I think we've all got a bit of a concern over the governance with that. I think we're going to get a lot of duplicated data coming through. But if I'm honest, when you do, that is probably a good sign. You need to be looking at Dataflex Pro. If that's a concern to you, that's when the Pro needs to come in and you to think about that. So,
and I guess those are the sorts of questions, that I kind of shudder when you go, oh, there's going to be a different environment for every team. IT departments look at teams and go, there's hundreds of them, there's thousands of them. How do we manage it? When we add another source of information, I think the duplication's an interesting one. Because I don't see
you would say the same with files and copying things like that. Same with planner tasks and doing things. So I think from a governance point of view, a lot of the things you should be doing with teams, as we talked about last time, will come in with those environments as well. I think that the duplication and the management of ongoing data is going to be the painful one. But
I would imagine that the duplication, you won't be able to just pull data into each team.
No.
So you'll be creating content within the context, storing it there. So theoretically, you won't have duplication.
Yeah.
So the aggregation will be the challenge. How do you report across an application that is deployed into 10 teams?
What I mean by duplication is, say within your team, you had a Power App that needed a list of teams in the organization or the organizational hierarchy, and then another team needs it and another team needs it, and you've got the central one, making sure that kind of cascades between all of them's going to be interesting. I think that's going to be
Power Platform. You can just go off to a central source then, can't you?
Yeah, but again, at that point, you're looking at Dataflex Pro.
Not necessarily if it's in
SharePoint, still,
building in the Canvas app and having a central SharePoint list.
Yeah. So there's certainly ways around that. But as you say, I think still questions. I don't think we've met anyone who's actually got hands on with it yet. So
no, but hopefully in the next part we will have a bit more of an insight.
I keep waiting for us to say something, and Chris appears just at the right moment, but it's not quite. Now, one of the things I always talk about and get obsessed about, I think it's something I want to mention here, and that's bots. It's something I believe with this, and I was 100%, is that you can have a Power Virtual Agent as part of this Dataflex as well. And that's even if you're not licensing Power Virtual Agent centrally, you can have one within this. And so in that way that I was talking about with CDS, that kind of hop to get to something a bit simpler that you can access on there. I've had the same thing with Power Virtual Agents. I think they're amazing. I think that initial price is too high. this to me feels like a very nice way of sort of saying, here is the power of Power Virtual Agents, where you can use it. You may want to use it a bit wider than that. If you do, then you need to go to that licensing, but here's a way you can try it out, see if it works for your organization, for your team. You know, you can have a team FAQ that you put in there with a bot that you can query that, you can hook it up to Power Automate. I feel that has been underplayed. There's been lots of talk about the CDS data side of things. I think the bot is in there as well. And if that is definitely the case, I think that would be a really good thing and really open up Power Virtual Agents to a lot more people.
Absolutely. And I think there are so many reasons to use CDS because of what you can build on it. The other one is the AI builder, being able to put those models in there as well, whether that will be something that you can just build into the apps that you're building in Teams.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. The other bit of news I think that came out from Inspire was around Teams meetings. So there was lots of good news and details about this, and I just realised I haven't managed to get the link about that. I think the big one that shone out for me was the ability within a meeting to have kind of custom apps effectively within that meeting. So,
yep.
And again, this is where it did fit the partner conference, that you could have an app that partners or you as an organization could develop and build, and that would sit within your meeting. So for example, you could have maybe your meeting room schedule. Say you were someone that ran meeting room booking systems, you could have that meeting room schedule so you knew who was coming up next in that meeting room, all sorts of things that you could really make available directly without the meeting. You could have, for example, and I've just thought of this and might start developing, you could have a timer so you know how long your podcast's going and whether you should move on quickly enough and not keep rabbiting on. So that could be a nice little thing on there.
I mean, that could just be an agenda management tool, couldn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was trying not to mention that in case someone stole that idea, but
absolutely. Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, might edit that one out. Yeah, absolutely. All sorts of different apps. So you can see here, for those watching the screen, you can maybe be talking about a conference. You could surface some of your dynamics data within there. If you're talking about an opportunity, you could surface that opportunity very easily within the meeting. So you're not talking about sharing screens. You're just talking about that summary while you can still look at people. Many of us are lucky to have multiple screens, but if you can have it all built within the meeting, there's a lot of opportunity within that to get in. So I think it'd be interesting to see how that works. It will be just as interesting to see what partners come up with, make available there, both paid and free.
And I guess that kind of comes on to a bit about the SharePoint framework and some changes and updates to that, a new release coming through. But also the ability to put SharePoint framework solutions into AppSource, which is essentially a marketplace for solutions where you can quite simply click on it and buy it from the marketplace from AppSource and install it. So that's another big change that will make these solutions much more accessible and easier to buy.
So I think in the absence of Gary, this is what we're talking about. It's the SPFX version 1.11. It's a lovely post from Jeff Teeper, which I'll get for the show notes about this. There were some other things. There's some more Teams functionality. Teams functionality. So for having your apps within Teams, there's more capability of developing against that. Also for task modules and messaging extensions. So within Teams, not only having a kind of single page app where you see things, but within your chat messages itself, you can get the extensions where you add things to your message, such as, if you've seen there, you can put a YouTube video within your chat messages. You can build custom ones of those. So there's a lot more support for that in SPFX now. But I think exactly as you're saying, Al, that SPFX for AppSource will really help partners adopt it, and I think see people jumping down it. Now, with AppSource, I can double check this later, but you can effectively buy, you can sell your SPFX modules. So it's not just about making things available. We've had for ages the ability to put things in GitHub. You could get that for free and maybe put some form of licensing around that because it's talking to your endpoints. But this is about formally developing a solution and making it available either for free or or to be paid as well. So it gives you that ability to just click and install it without having to know a developer, without having to have those deployments. Obviously, you can put your governance in the store around that, but making it much easier for partners to develop interesting stuff and get that available. So, yeah, I thought it was a very nice move.
I think, yeah, you reminded me, is that there was another announcement around flow triggers. So part of Power Automate, flow triggers for teams to be able to trigger them on messages. I can't remember where I saw that.
So it's a good post I was going to put in the show notes anyway from, and I should have prepped this because I know I will get his name wrong. So I'm going to find it before I say it. But he was looking at exactly that, and also how that worked with the bot framework. So effectively, I think where they've extended it is with adaptive cards.
Yeah. So there were certainly mentions with adaptive cards, making that work better. But I'm sure I saw something. I'll need to dig that out to put it in the show notes.
Okay, yeah, if you have some of that. So this was a post from Vardhan Deshpande, and was saying that you can get those mentions into the adaptive cards, so you can get those triggers from people on there. The only problem I'm seeing with this at the moment is you can mention people, but not teams or channels or bots at the moment, which I think is a little bit of a shame. That would have been very useful as one for mentioning people. I don't know if we've talked about on the show before, but I have written a Where on Earth bot. It's available at github.com/KevMcDonk if you want to have a look. And every day we trigger out, and it takes the Bing background picture, and someone can either choose that or choose a random image from Google, and we all have to guess where in the world it is. And we have various triggers that remind people about it, one that gets the results at the end of the day if we've forgotten to do it. And it also mentions, well, it used to mention the channel, which was a nice trigger. And I think for timesheets, we've done the same thing, but they broke that, which was really frustrating. So it looks like now you can mention people, which is a nice step, but it'd be really good to be able to mention the channel as well to get that kind of nagbot type functionality.
Oh, we love the concept of a nagbot, don't we? So long as it's not nagging us.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I will be honest. The reason I like it is because I need it, because I never do my timesheets and bits like that, as you well know. So the reason I like these things is a nice reminder. Automate these things, have it nag you, and have it not just nag you, but make it easy to solve things right from within Teams. You've got a lovely solution there.
So another thing that caught my eye in Inspire was around the security and compliance, and I need to dig into it more, but it was part of Microsoft Information Protection, MIP, and starting to incorporate endpoint protection into sensitivity labels and classifications. So in the same way that we've had it with Teams now for a little while, where we can say we have a confidential label, and we can say that we want to be able to apply that to as part of the creation process for a team or SharePoint site, being able to then say, well, what can you actually do on the devices as well? As I say, it's quite new. I haven't had a chance to look into it, but it does feel like that's the final step to be able to then say, what can you actually do when this document or content is at rest on your machine, in terms of the endpoint protection on the devices. So
that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So that would be an interesting one to dig into as well.
So the thought there is that you can control differently on devices how content is seen and shared.
Yeah.
So effectively to other one. Okay.
Yeah. So I've got an iOS device. Can I do things on that I can't do on an Android device or a Windows device or a Mac?
Yeah. That could be very interesting. Yeah, that sounds really useful, actually. I think it's the same with these conferences. It's often those little announcements that can have a really big impact for some people that are not the big wow factor ones that will get shouted about. But
yeah, the subtle ones that sometimes are just a little bit more subtle. But yeah, so it's something to keep an eye on. I'll enjoy having a play with that and see what I can do.
Yeah, well, that does sound good. So I think that wraps up the most of the news, unless there's something else you can think we've missed out.
I'm sure there's a ton of stuff that we've missed this week, and I'm
I
sure it'll come up
you-
in upcoming weeks as well.
Absolutely. The show notes, we'll try and include some of the things that we haven't necessarily mentioned that weren't quite so big. There has been a lot that's come out this week, both around Inspire and other things as well. So there will be some additional things in the show notes. The other thing is to mention some events. So Al, I think you're speaking this week, aren't you?
Yep, I've got a SharePoint and Office 365 user group. So, friend of the show, Matt Weston, his user group is on Wednesday, 6:30, and I'm doing a session purely on To-Do. So, why Microsoft To-Do is good for your mental health. So, it's got a little bit of psychology in it, but it's got an awful lot of tips and tricks for using To-Do to try and alleviate some of that cognitive load, the stuff that makes us worry at night. So yes, that should be a good one, and I keep spotting new things to add into it. So it'll be jam-packed full of demos of all sorts of tips and tricks for To-Do.
Nice. And Dylan Hayes speaking there as well. Who's
Yep, Dylan's doing his security piece.
Someone we should get on the show actually.
Yep.
I'd love to hear from Dylan. I've heard that securing your plans for world domination with Microsoft 365. It's a great talk, so
it is
definitely worth sticking around for that as well. So that's a nice one. The other event coming up in September, so a little way to go. I'm just looking, September the 1st. That's just after the August bank holiday, isn't it? So yeah, we will be back from holiday for that one, thankfully. Is the PMP, the Patterns and Practices team, are running a virtual conference. So I know we talk about PMP, and obviously Gary with the CLI for Microsoft 365, still getting used to that new name on there. It's obviously a member of the core team there, and people like Vesa and Erwin, some really good ones there. I think there will be some really good events. I was just looking. I don't think they've announced any kind of schedule or agenda for it. I do believe, if he can get a good night's sleep, that the Beard of Grey Hat Beard will be speaking at that one.
I believe so as well, but it will depend on his sleep.
Yeah, it will definitely depend on his beauty sleep. He does need a lot of beauty sleep. So I think he'll be talking about the CLI for Microsoft 365 and some of the great stuff he does about that. But I'm sure we'll talk about that in upcoming shows. And last but absolutely not least, a friend of the show, Chirag Patel, who was on the last one and talked about the Microsoft 365 user group. There's another session on that. And I'm just trying to see the date. It's definitely going to be in August, and I can't see the date on there, which is embarrassing. We'll make sure that's in the show notes, but yeah, do sign up for that. For the August meeting there. They've got getting started with GitHub and with Git and GitHub for the reluctant IT pro. So I think that's something that Gary would be very I know Gary is very much trying to get us all making sure we use Git effectively and manage everything we do, capturing all the bits of work there. So whether you're an IT pro or not, I think getting your stuff into GitHub is sensible.
Thomas and Jasper are both very, very good speakers. So that'll be well worth attending.
Absolutely. And talking about governance and Microsoft Teams, obviously a topic we loved talking about on the last show. So do have a listen to that, and then go and listen to Jasper and see any things we missed on that. The other thing I draw out about this is, for those of you like me who sometimes struggle with kids going to bed when a lot of these user groups on, the Microsoft 365 is from 4 to 6 UK time. So yes, possibly clashes over a bit of work, but you can listen into it while you're finishing off some work. But a much better time for those who are trying to put kids to bed. So definitely keep an eye out for that. So, no sign of Chris yet, unfortunately, but I think we'll wrap up the news there. we will be getting in part 2 some fantastic conversations on Power Platform. We've had some, I think about 10 questions from listeners, which is really great. So we will try and get as many of those answered as possible. We'll give an overview of what licensing is with the Power Platform, things you need to consider, things you need to think about. And yeah, hopefully we'll have some more questions for Chris and not annoy him too much so he storms off. But I will try not to say, well, can't you just use SharePoint lists instead too often, just to wind him up. Yeah, exactly. And we might mention certain other people who like the same thing as well. Not mentioning any names, Nigel. Otherwise, I think we'll wrap up part 1 there. Shame we couldn't have Gary. I hope you enjoyed the news and join us in part 2 as we talk about Power Platform licensing. Thanks very much.
Thank you.